Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to continue with my new series, so stay tuned and see what I'm talking about today. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I'm going to continue along with my new series, The Path from Religion to Truth. That's what I've decided to name this series, so hey, let's go with that. On the last video, I left off at approximately around the age of 8 or 9. About the same in the way Southern Baptist culture is kind of constructed. You go up in your Sunday school levels based off of what grade you're in. So usually, you're 8, 9, you're going to be in this grade, you're going to be in this Sunday school class kind of thing. So the situation is, at this point, my father was a brick mason, and I did a lot of side jobs with my dad and helped him on the jobs that he did outside of his regular work. And so he was working with a guy that went to this one church in the area, and that church had just bought a previous building that was a school. They wanted to change that building into the new church building, and so they hired my dad to do all the work on the school building to turn it into a church building. So you had to take your regular size windows that are much larger and turn them into the little skinny windows, and different things like that. Take out certain walls, put different walls in, a myriad of other things. So it was like a long, drawn-out job. And I helped my dad on this job. This was also known in the church, and that happened to be the church that I went to. One of the things about Southern Baptist culture, especially in this area, is about prestige. A lot of it is, what clothes are you wearing? It may not be openly said, but it's just how people are treated in the church. Now, like I've said a couple of times in this series, I came from a working class family. And I am still a working class person, even though I have an education at this point. I still am in the working class category. But anyway, so my clothes were not the same as the other girls. Of course, my parents didn't attend church, which also put me in a different kind of bracket inside of the church. I rode the Sunday school bus to church with one of my friends that lived across the street. We went to the same church. So the kids that rode the Sunday school bus to church, that their parents weren't active in the church, were treated one way. And then if you were working class, blue collar, in a certain bracket as it was felt in the church, you were also in a different kind of bracket socially in the church. So the way that worked out was, you all may be in the same Sunday class together, but then at this point we were considered to be big kids. So you go to big church, as it's called, which is the adult sermon, which of course for all kids is extremely boring, and there's really nothing for you to do. Well, if your parents didn't attend church, you were all put together on one pew in the very back of the church. And that was to keep you from distracting any of the other more godly children from learning more about Christ and God and all of those things. And also, you weren't just in the way. But also, it was kind of a shunning of sorts. The kids whose parents attended church generally either sat with their parents, or they all sat together. All those kids that their parents attended church sat together more closer to the pulpit, and they got to have a little bit more leniency, let's say, in how they acted. If we were to fall asleep in church, literally, an adult would get up off of the pew and come over there and shake us violently awake. We were given a pad of paper and a couple of pencils, and we would like sit there and doodle or pass notes between each other, because we didn't really understand what was going on. You're 8, you're 9 years old. You're not going to really understand these life lessons that they're talking about. But in true Southern Baptist Church fashion, at the end of every church sermon is the open call to the altar. I'm going to open the altar up for any of those that want to come forth. And every adult would turn and look to the back pew and look at us as if, are you going to go up front? Are you going to go dedicate your life to God? Because we were literally seen as the lowest class in the church that needed the most saving. Now, here's the thing about Southern Baptist culture. You may dedicate your life to God and you may be saved, but you may be even baptized, but that does not stick. If you have an impure thought, if you do something wrong, if you sin in any way, you have to rededicate yourself openly in church at the open altar call. You have to change completely because you're being judged. Openly judged. Continuously judged. Now, here's a little secret about that. Like I said, in this small town that I live in now, and even the small town that I was from previously, there's churches everywhere. But there are also things like bars and, things of that nature. And I can tell you right now, I can go any other day of the week. Monday night, Tuesday night, Thursday night, Friday and Saturday night. I can pull up to any bar in this town and I can find a deacon of a church. I can find a pastor of a church. I can find half of the choir. I can find any number of these holy rollers in the bar, drinking, cussing, shooting pool, betting on games, all of the things that are just so against God. Another thing that we were preached to as children is that tattoos are against God. Now, as you can see, I'm heavily tatted now, and even as a child, I was obsessed with tattoos. Like, my dad had some old school tattoos from when he was younger. I thought tattoos were cool. And I was told, no, you are defiling your temple. Your temple is God's house and you do not do that, and blah, 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 blah. So, these holy rollers, quite a few of them have some tattoos. You just don't know it. Or they think you don't know it. But anyway, like I said, every church service, Wednesday night, Sunday night, revivals, Bible school, whatever, ended with an open altar call. And you were expected to go down and rededicate yourself to God and pray at the altar on your hands and knees and beg for forgiveness and the whole nine. And if you were one of those people that went up and said that you were, you'd found God and you were saved, they made it a full-on production. They would announce it to everybody in the church, and everybody would come by and shake your hand, and it was a huge thing. Now, as children, it was one of those things that you had to do it at some point. Had to. Now, by the age of 8 or 9, I was pretty well convinced that everything that they were telling me was the truth. It was just the truth. So one of the open altar calls, I marched my happy little butt down that aisle and, went through the whole process and dedicated myself to the Lord. And here they go, making it a huge thing in front of the church. And I'm standing in front of the church. I didn't like being around a lot of people, and to begin with, I also didn't like being called out in front of a lot of people. But here I am in front of a packed church being called out in front of all these people. And then as people are walking by and they're shaking my hand and giving me hugs and telling me everything is so great and wonderful and they're so happy that I did that, I start hearing whispers. So church lets out that day, and I'm walking out to go get on the Sunday school bus so I can go home. And at that time, 8 or 9 years old, I'm like 3.5 feet, 4 foot tall. I was short. I'm not very tall to begin with. I'm only 5'3". So that time I was very short. It's also very slim. So it was very easy for me to walk up to people and they not realize I was there. So I'm walking past these ladies and they didn't realize I was standing there, and they started talking about me and how, well, it's not going to be long before she's going to have to rededicate herself to the Lord because, she comes from one of those working class families. All they do is drink beer and sin, and she's not got a good, stable support system at home. Her parents have never even been to church, which wholeheartedly pissed me off. Because at that time, one thing you never did was speak ill of my father. Still, to this day, one thing you will not do is speak ill of my father. But at that time, it was like hero worship status. That man hung the moon in my eyes, and I was fuming. I've never been one to disrespect an adult to that point. But I looked at that one older lady, and I told her, I said, you don't know my family at all. And for you to stand out here and stand in judgment is the wrong thing to do. And I stomped my happy little behind off and got onto the Sunday school bus. That next week I didn't want to go to church, but it was one of those things because, especially now since I was, my father was working for the church, it was definite I was going to be going every Sunday. So I get up and I go to church, and the pastor is standing right next to where the Sunday school church bus parks. And there's that little old lady with her little beehived hairdo standing there with her arms crossed. So all the kids start filing off. And I knew that they were standing there waiting for me, so I made sure I was the last kid to get off that bus. Because one thing you're not going to do is you're not going to chastise me when I'm in the right in front of everybody else. So everybody else was getting off. My friend was looking at me. She's like, come on. I was like, go ahead. I'll meet you in a minute. I get off the bus, and the pastor tells me that I owe Miss So-and-so an apology. And I said, no, sir, I do not. Because one thing I do not do is apologize when I'm in the right. And this lady was talking bad about my parents. And one thing I'm not going to do at any point in time is stand here while somebody speaks bad about my parents. And he told me this long story about how Christ would turn the other cheek, and you can't take everything that everybody says to heart. And she just was saying, with the fact that your parents don't attend church, that it was highly likely that you were going to have issues with continuing in the Lord, and all of these things and that and the other. And then he told me again, now you owe Miss So-and-so an apology. And I looked him square in the face and I said, as soon as she apologizes to me, I will never apologize to some young little punk child. I said, ma'am, one thing I am not is a punk. I do not get in trouble. I come to this church every day. I said, I come to this church every Sunday. I've come to this church every Sunday for the past 2 years. And you stood in front of that congregation and you gave me a hug, and then you rightly turned around and stood out in front of this church and badmouthed my family. and I turned and I walked to Sunday school. I was continued to be treated like crap. But I just figured I was going to stand on my newfound saved status, because that puts you in this whole little other bracket on the outcast side, and I was going to just keep on going. That Sunday afternoon in the big church, the entire sermon was about how we need to learn Christian forgiveness and to turn the other cheek even when we feel that we're in the right. Anybody got an idea who that was being aimed at? But I had to continue on. So, 8, 9, 10 years old. 10 years old starts a very precarious age, because you're starting to get into those like preteen years, and they're not, nobody's going to talk about sex. Nobody's going to talk about, anything to do with some real world issues. You're not going to find out any relationship advice. You're not going to find out how to actually handle situations. You're just going to be told that as a young woman, you are to remain chaste and not to have sex, not to engage in activities that would leave you soiled, as they should say. And that started when I was 10. Now, I had no clue at the age of 10 what these people were talking about. Now, I was also in a class, they started putting you in this larger class with the preteens and young teenagers. You're all stuck together. Then they started kind of bunching all of the middle-aged teenagers, and then once you hit 17, 18, you started going off to the adult Sunday school classes. So at the preteen age, you're kind of in there with 10 to 12-year-olds. It's the bracket that's in there. And most of us had not gotten our period. At that point, I wasn't even thinking about boys as that way. I had good friends that were guys. I was that girl that hung out with all of the guys and roughhoused and did that. That was me. So all of my best friends were guys. But there were girls in that class that had already started, wearing makeup and all this and that. And I'm just can I hurry up and go home and get out of this dress? Because I'm really got other things to do. But they really pressed in the gender roles. They were preaching to women that, you're to dress modestly, you are to present yourself ladylike, you are to be looking for good qualities in somebody that you want to marry, because you're supposed to be married and be married forever and have children, even though half of the people in the church were divorced and their ex-people were in other churches married to somebody else, and they were here married to somebody else. It's the biggest thing. A lot of the reason why there are so many churches in this area is so that if you have a strife with somebody, say you're married and y'all go to church together. Say that you're getting divorced. Well, your mate can say, all right, well, I still want to go to this church. So you go find another Southern Baptist church and go over there, and she stays here. Or you stay there and she goes over to this other Southern Baptist church. However it works out. That way, everybody still has a church. That's the way it works. But it's complete hypocrisy. They continue to tell you all the things that you're supposed to do. However, none of them are living up to any of these ideas. So, we go on the same route. You go to Sunday school, you're there for a little bit, then you go over to big church, and all of the kids that don't have their parents there are stuck on the back row. this point, more of my friends have joined the church, and so we've all grouped up together. We've started bringing like our own pens and paper and stuff, and we'll sit there and write notes back and forth to each other and kind of just have us a little time, because we did not still understand what was going on, because nobody took the time to explain anything to us, because we were the outcast of the church. Now, the other kids whose parents were like very religious, when we were doing things in Sunday school like Bible trivia and stuff like that, they always had all these, like they always knew everything. That's because people were sitting down and taking time with them and explaining things to them inside the church. Like we would we would be going to our Sunday school class and we would be told, line up outside, and they would have these other children inside the classroom explaining things to them, and then they would allow the rest of us in there. So it was a very divided culture. It was very divided along social lines. Now, by this point, I had started kind of reading the Bible on my own at home, and had started reading Bible bedtime story type things to try to understand things that were going on, because I was always still the inquisitive one, why are they saying this, or what does this mean? But since I could not ask those questions at church, and I didn't have anybody that I could go to and ask those questions, it was one of those things that was stuck for me to answer myself. And at that time, it was not the age of the internet. Like I said, I'm 36. I was born in the 80s. This is right there at the early 90s. Internet was not a thing. I didn't get internet in my household until I was high school age. And the only reason why my parents consented to internet at that time is because I'd had surgery. I didn't get my first cell phone until I was 16 or 17. It just was not the thing, okay? We still had phones with cords, or your cordless phone that had the big antenna that you had to pull out. So if you wanted to learn something, you actually had to pick up a book and read it. And so I did. And I still had questions. And there was still nobody to answer them. But I still tried. So I'm going to leave you there, approximately the age of 12. Okay? So on the next one, I will cover more of my teen years and kind of some of the tribulations and trials that went on there. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this one. If you like this story time kind of thing, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, and ring that bell so that you're notified every single time that I upload a new video. In the comment section down below, you can continue on letting me know what you think about Southern Baptist culture, or were you a Southern Baptist? Did you experience the same things? What do you think about the things that I experienced in my early years? All of those kinds of things. And in the description box down below is my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and email. You can reach me on any of those platforms, and I'd be glad to talk to you. And that's going to do it for today's video, guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.